Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Justin at WinkSound.com. I want to talk about this phrase that gets thrown around a lot in the studio, and that phrase is basically fix it in the mix. Oh, don't worry, we'll fix it in the mix. And basically what this phrase means is, let's say you got a drummer, for example, and his take, there's some timing issues there, and they'll say, oh, don't worry, we'll fix it in the mix. And basically what they'll do is they'll go back, chop up the drummer's hits, and align them so it's perfectly in time. Now, I really don't like this idea, and I try to avoid it as much as possible because this is very time consuming and stressful to do these kind of editing work. It could take the drummer 5 minutes to go in and do another take, and it'll sound much better instead of 2 hours chopping up the audio and doing time adjustments. You do time adjustments, it could affect the drummer's feel, it could affect the sound, because when you're stretching out audio and stuff like that, you could get some artifacts in there. So you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. Another example is maybe you're miking up an amp and there's some noise coming in from somewhere, and you'll say, oh, don't worry, we'll fix it in the mix. It'll take you 2 hours to try to get out all that noise instead of 5 minutes with moving the amp to a different section of the room, putting up some absorbers to isolate that mic better. 5 minutes instead of 2 hours. When you're in the studio, time is money, so you want to try to avoid these things as much as possible. Make all the adjustments that you need when you do the recording instead of spending hours and hours editing and mixing later on. When you get to the mixing stage of the track or the album, whatever it is, you want to do just that. You want to be mixing. You want to be putting in your EQ, your compressors, effects, things like setting your levels, things like that. You don't want to be sitting there for hours doing tedious work, chopping up all the audio and all that stuff. So, another example is, if you say fix it in the mix, and then when you go back to actually hear it to do the fixing, there's no possible way to fix anything. And you can't call up that musician and be like, hey, can you come in to do another take? Sometimes, musicians don't have time like that to go and do those kind of things. So you want to try to get the best possible takes when you're in the studio recording that musician, whatever instrument they're recording. Like I said, avoid this idea of fixing in the mix and get the best possible takes of that musician and of that instrument as you can when you're there in the studio. It's going to save you a lot of time, a lot of stress, and you're going to get tracks done a lot faster because there's going to be a lot less things that you have to, deal with when you're mixing. You just go in and mix, and the track's done. So yeah, avoid that phrase, fixing it in the mix. Talk to you soon, guys.